Arizona has 7.4 million people, and almost every single one of them depends on water that is running out. The Colorado River is shrinking, Lake Mead has dropped to levels nobody thought possible, groundwater aquifers that took thousands of years to fill are being drained in decades, and the state just told developers they cannot build nearly 500,000 new homes because there is simply not enough water left to support them. And while all of this is happening, home prices in parts of Arizona are doing something they have not done in years. They are going down, and in some places they are going down fast. These are 10 Arizona cities where the water crisis and the housing market are colliding in real time, and the numbers should concern anyone who owns property in this state. Number 10, Prescott. Search Prescott, Arizona on Google Maps and you will find it about 100 miles north of Phoenix, sitting at 5,400 feet in the mountains, with cooler temperatures and pine trees and a downtown square that looks like it belongs in a different state entirely. Prescott has been one of Arizona's most popular retirement destinations for years, because it gives you Arizona sunshine without the brutal desert heat, and the small town charm feels like something out of the 1950s. Population around 46,000 and growing steadily as retirees from Phoenix, California, and the Midwest keep arriving. But that growth is running straight into a water wall, because Prescott sits in the Prescott Active Management Area, where groundwater has been declining for decades as more people move in and more wells pump from the same shrinking supply. The city has been working on importing water from the Big Tino Aquifer through a pipeline, but the project has faced opposition, environmental concerns, and cost overruns that keep pushing the timeline further out. Meanwhile, home prices that climbed aggressively during the pandemic have started softening as buyers begin asking a question that nobody was asking 5 years ago, which is, where does the water come from, and how long will it last? Median home prices in Prescott peaked around $500,000 and have started to ease back as inventory grows and the water conversation gets louder. For a retirement town, the equation is simple. Retirees want peace of mind, and a town fighting over future water supply does not deliver that, no matter how beautiful the sunsets are. And if a mountain town is worrying about water, imagine what is happening in a tourist town that depends on visitors who use even more of it. Like this video and subscribe. Trust me, the water gets scarcer from here. Number 9, Sedona. Search Sedona, Arizona on Google Maps and you will find one of the most photographed places in America. Sitting among red rock formations in the Verde Valley, about 2 hours north of Phoenix, Sedona draws millions of tourists every year who come for the hiking, the spiritual energy, the art galleries, and the views that make your phone camera feel inadequate. Population around 10,000 full-time residents, but the tourist foot traffic makes the town function like a city 10 times that size. And all of those tourists use water. Sedona's water comes from the regional aquifer, and the system is under increasing pressure as drought reduces recharge rates, while tourism and short-term rental growth keeps demand climbing. The city has implemented water restrictions, including limits on outdoor watering, restrictions on new swimming pools, and requirements for water-efficient landscaping. Home prices in Sedona are among the highest in rural Arizona, with medians pushing past $700,000 during the pandemic peak, and while prices have softened, the real concern is not what homes cost today, but what they will be worth in 10 years if the water situation does not improve. The irony of Sedona is that the beauty that makes it valuable is the same desert landscape that makes water scarce, and the tourists who drive the economy are the same people straining the supply. A town that sells tranquility and natural beauty while quietly rationing the one resource that makes life possible in the desert, from red rocks to farmland where the water is disappearing even faster. Number 8, Casa Grande. Search Casa Grande, Arizona on Google Maps and you will find it in Pinal County, about halfway between Phoenix and Tucson, sitting in flat agricultural land that has been farmed for generations. Population around 58,000. Casa Grande and the surrounding Pinal County area have been hit hard by cuts to their Colorado River water allocation through the Central Arizona Project. Agricultural water deliveries to the county have been slashed by more than 30%. Forcing some farms to reduce operations or shut down entirely, while others have turned to pumping groundwater at rates that are draining wells faster than nature can refill them. The agricultural collapse has a direct impact on the local economy, because when farms close, the jobs tied to those farms disappear, and the businesses that serve those workers follow. Home prices in Casa Grande climbed during the pandemic as Phoenix buyers looked for cheaper alternatives, but that growth has stalled as the water reality sets in and new development faces restrictions. The median home price sits around $280,000 to $310,000, which is affordable by Arizona standards, but the question buyers are now asking is whether affordability matters if the well runs dry. Drive through the farmland around Casa Grande and you will see fields that used to grow cotton and alfalfa now sitting brown and fallow because the water that fed them is gone. And that is not a metaphor for what could happen to the housing market. It is a preview of what happens when a community built on water loses access to it. From dying farmland to a military town where even the army is worried about water. Number 7. Sierra Vista. Search Sierra Vista, Arizona on Google Maps and you will find it in Cochise County in southeastern Arizona near the Mexican border about 75 miles southeast of Tucson. Population around 44,000 with a significant portion connected to Fort Huachuca, a major U.S. Army installation that serves as one of the military's primary intelligence and electronic warfare training centers. Sierra Vista's water comes almost entirely from groundwater pumped from the upper San Pedro Basin, and that basin has been in trouble for years as pumping exceeds natural recharge. The San Pedro River, which once flowed year-round through the valley, has dried up in many stretches, and environmental groups have been sounding alarms for over a decade about the long-term viability of the water supply. The military connection adds another layer of concern because Fort Huachuca needs water to operate, and if the groundwater situation becomes severe enough, it could theoretically affect the base's future, which would devastate the local economy since the fort is the largest employer in the region. Home prices in Sierra Vista are relatively affordable, with medians around $250,000 to $280,000, but values have been flat or declining in some areas as the water conversation grows louder and the uncertainty around the base's long-term presence adds a question mark that buyers do not want hanging over a 30-year mortgage. A town where the river is dying, the aquifer is shrinking, and the military base that keeps everything running needs water that might not be there in 20 years, from a military town to a city that sits on the very river that is disappearing. Number 6. Lake Havasu City. Search Lake Havasu City, Arizona on Google Maps and you will find it on the eastern shore of Lake Havasu, which is formed by the Colorado River on the Arizona-California border about 200 miles northwest of Phoenix. Population around 57,000 with a heavy retiree and tourism presence anchored by the famous London Bridge that was literally shipped from England and reassembled here in 1971. The irony of Lake Havasu City is that it sits directly on the Colorado River, the very body of water that is at the center of Arizona's water crisis. And while the city currently has access to river water, the long-term outlook is shaped entirely by what happens to the Colorado River system. Lake Mead, which controls the river's flow, has dropped to levels that exposed intake pipes and revealed the white bathtub ring that has become the most recognizable symbol of the Western water crisis. The rules governing how 7 states share Colorado River water expire at the end of 2026, and the new agreement is expected to include deeper cuts for Arizona, which means cities like Lake Havasu that depend directly on the river could see their allocations reduced. Home prices here peaked during the pandemic as retirees and remote workers discovered a lakeside lifestyle at desert prices, with medians around $350,000 to $400,000. But the market has softened as the conversation about the Colorado River's future gets more serious. A city named after a lake on a river that is shrinking, selling waterfront retirement dreams while the water itself is disappearing inch by inch. From the river's edge to the second largest city in the state. Number 5. Tucson. Search Tucson, Arizona on Google Maps and you will find Arizona's second largest city sitting in the Sonoran Desert in Pima County, about 110 miles southeast of Phoenix. Population around 543,000 with a metro of over 1 million people. Tucson has actually been more proactive about water conservation than Phoenix, implementing aggressive programs, including mandatory rainwater harvesting for new commercial buildings, reclaimed water use for golf courses and parks, and tiered water pricing that charges heavy users significantly more. But being proactive does not mean the problem is solved, because Tucson depends on Colorado River water delivered through the Central Arizona Project, and those deliveries are being cut. The city has been banking water underground in a program that stores excess CAP water in aquifers during wet years to use during dry ones, and this strategy has given Tucson more of a buffer than many Arizona cities. However, the buffer is not infinite, and if Colorado River cuts deepen beyond current projections, which many experts expect, Tucson will eventually feel the squeeze. Home prices in Tucson are more moderate than Phoenix, with medians around $310,000 to $350,000, and the market has seen a mild correction from pandemic peaks. Tucson is doing more than most to prepare, but the fundamental math has not changed, which is that 500,000 people live in a desert and the river that feeds them is carrying less water every year. From a city trying to prepare to a city that grew too fast to notice the problem. Number 4. Queen Creek. Search Queen Creek, Arizona on Google Maps and you will find it on the southeastern edge of the Phoenix Metro in Maricopa and Pinal counties. Population around 65,000 and growing rapidly as families priced out of Scottsdale, Chandler, and Gilbert moved further east for newer homes and bigger lots. Queen Creek is one of the cities directly affected by Arizona's groundwater crisis because much of the planned development in the area was depending on groundwater that the state has now determined cannot sustain 100 years of supply, which is the legal requirement for new subdivisions. Some planned communities have been put on hold, and others have had to find alternative water sources at significantly higher costs, which gets passed directly to home buyers through higher water bills and HOA fees. Home prices in Queen Creek climbed past $450,000 during the pandemic peak as the city represented the new frontier of Phoenix suburban expansion, but prices have pulled back as buyers realize that the frontier comes with a water asterisk. The houses are new, and the streets are clean, and the schools are good, but the question underneath all of it is the same question underneath everything in Arizona, which is, where does the water come from, and is there enough? From a suburb hitting its water limit to a city where the state literally said, stop building. Number 3, Phoenix. Search Phoenix, Arizona on Google Maps and you will find the 5th largest city in America, sprawling across the Valley of the Sun with 1.65 million people in the city and nearly 5 million in the metro. Phoenix is the elephant in the room of Arizona's water crisis because everything about this city was built on a promise that water would always be available, and that promise is now being tested. The Central Arizona Project Canal that delivers Colorado River water to Phoenix stretches 336 miles across the desert, and the water it carries is being reduced. Arizona faces an 18% cut to its Colorado River allocation in 2026 under the current shortage tier, and the operating rules that govern the river expire at the end of this year with no new agreement in place, meaning deeper cuts could follow. Phoenix's groundwater is also under pressure as NASA satellite data shows aquifer levels declining steadily over the past 2 decades. Home prices in the Phoenix metro have dropped roughly 12 to 15% from their 2022 peak, with the metro median sitting around $410,000 to $430,000 depending on the data source. The correction is driven by a combination of oversupply, high mortgage rates, and a growing awareness among buyers that the water situation is not a distant theoretical problem, but an active evolving crisis that could affect property values for decades. Phoenix is not going to run out of water tomorrow, but the math is moving in the wrong direction, and every buyer signing a 30-year mortgage in this city is making a bet that the Colorado River and the aquifers will hold up for the length of that loan. From the largest city to a suburb where the state drew a line in the sand. Number 2, Buckeye. Search Buckeye, Arizona on Google Maps and you will find it on the western edge of the Phoenix metro, about 35 miles west of downtown, stretching deep into the desert. Buckeye was the fastest growing city in America for several years running, as developers built master-planned communities at a pace that seemed to have no limit. Population around 117,000, and at the rate it was growing, some projections had Buckeye reaching 300,000 or more within a decade. Then the state stepped in. In 2023, the Arizona Department of Water Resources determined that the Phoenix Active Management Area had reached the limits of groundwater supply and stopped issuing new Assured Water Supply certificates. The impact on Buckeye was immediate and massive because nearly 500,000 planned homes across the region were affected, and Buckeye was ground zero for the freeze. Entire master plan communities that had been approved and marketed were suddenly on hold with no timeline for when or if construction would resume. The most visible symbol of the freeze is a massive concrete arch bridge built to connect an existing subdivision to North Star Ranch, a planned 9,600 home community that is now on hold. Locals call it the Bridge to Nowhere because it spans the Central Arizona Project Canal and connects to empty desert where thousands of homes were supposed to be. People who bought early in some of these developments now live in half-finished neighborhoods miles from the nearest store or school, waiting for neighbors and infrastructure that may never come. Home prices in Buckeye have softened as the the reality of the development freeze settles in, and the promise of a booming suburb transforms into the uncertainty of a community that grew faster than its water supply could support. From a city that built too fast to a community where the water was literally turned off. Number 1. Rio Verde Foothills. Search Rio Verde Foothills, Arizona on Google Maps, and you will find an unincorporated community of about 2,000 homes northeast of Scottsdale, where the pavement ends and the desert begins. Median home prices here were around $825,000, with some properties exceeding $1 million, offering buyers large desert lots, mountain views, and the kind of quiet that only comes from living at the edge of civilization. There was just one problem that many buyers did not fully understand until it was too late, which is that Rio Verde Foothills has no municipal water system. About 500 to 700 homes relied on water trucked in from Scottsdale through private haulers, an arrangement that had worked for years until Scottsdale decided it could not spare the water anymore. On January 1st, 2023, Scottsdale shut off the tap. Not a reduction, not a rate increase, the water stopped. Residents woke up on New Year's Day to discover that the city they depended on for their most basic need had decided its own residents came first, and Rio Verde Foothills was on its own. What followed was a crisis that made national headlines. Families skipped showers, washed dishes by hand with collected rainwater, ate off paper plates, and drove to friends' houses in neighboring cities just to take a shower. Water haulers who used to fill up in Scottsdale, 13 miles away, now had to drive to alternative sources much further out, which tripled the delivery cost for some households, meaning residents were paying more for water than their monthly mortgage payment. The real estate market in Rio Verde collapsed almost immediately. A local realtor who sells 80% of her properties in the area reported having one person show up to an open house. Approximately 75 listed homes either canceled their listings or let them expire because nobody wants to buy $1 million home that does not have running water. Home prices dropped by tens of thousands of dollars, and some sellers simply could not find buyers at any price. The state eventually passed legislation forcing Scottsdale to continue providing water through 2025, and a Canadian utility company called EPCOR was approved to build a permanent water system. But the cost is enormous, with hookup fees reaching $24,000 per home, and monthly water bills expected to be significantly higher than what residents paid before. The developers who built Rio Verde Foothills exploited a loophole in Arizona law that allowed them to subdivide land into parcels of 5 or fewer lots without proving a 100-year water supply. They built homes, sold them to families, took the profits, and left the water problem for someone else to solve. The governor's office has since issued cease and desist orders against developers trying to continue this practice, calling it exactly what it is, which is profiting at the expense of everyday Arizonans. Picture this. You are standing in the driveway of $1 million home in Arizona. The desert stretches out in every direction. The mountains glow red at sunset. The silence is perfect. And a truck pulls up to fill your water tank because your house does not have running water. That is Rio Verde Foothills in 2026. That is what happens when a state builds faster than its water can support. And that is a warning for every city on this list. 10 cities and 1 state that built its future on a resource that is disappearing. Groundwater declining, Colorado River shrinking, Lake Mead dropping, 500,000 homes canceled, and one community where $1 million houses get their water delivered by truck. Arizona is not running out of water tomorrow, but it is running out of the comfortable certainty that water will always be there. And in real estate, certainty is the only thing that holds prices up. When buyers stop trusting that the taps will keep flowing, they stop buying. And when they stop buying, prices follow the water down. Which city concerned you the most? Do you live in one of these places? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe because we cover stories like this every single week. See you in the next one.